Let's get started with today's topic.
Welcome to Luminous Star Fables. Let's take a deep dive as I explain and draw parallels to films like Get Out, the Netflix documentary, Sean Combs, The Reckoning, and the horror movie, Him, pointing out that the ritualized control tactics that are sometimes explored through horror stories and films. It reinforces the idea that survivors often recognize emotional truths in fiction before they can name them in real life. I'll also discuss psychological control and the release of the Epstein files. As the world continues to sift through the fragments of what has been revealed, one truth becomes impossible to ignore, and it seems like the story isn't finished. But before we really get into this video, be advised that this video is not speculation, only narrative storytelling grounded in public reporting and cultural discourse. This content is for educational and awareness purposes only. It does not diagnose, label, or target individuals or groups. Be advised to reach out to trusted support systems if you feel that it is necessary. As the world continues to sift through the fragments of what has been revealed, one truth becomes impossible to ignore: the story isn't finished. The documents may be released, but the meaning behind them is still unfolding. In courtrooms, in living rooms, and across the digital landscape where millions are still searching for answers. Today, we're stepping into that unfolding story. We're exploring how the release of the Epstein files sent a shockwave through public consciousness, how thousands of pages, some clear, some swallowed in black ink, ignited a global demand for transparency, and how the cultural conversation surrounding these documents continues to evolve in real time. This isn't speculation. This isn't sensationalism. This is a grounded, narrative exploration of what the public saw, how they reacted, and why this moment matters. If you've been following the headlines, the redactions, the commentary, or the cultural parallels people are drawing across film, media, and public discourse, you're in the right place. Okay, many of you are probably aware or have noticed the beginning of a digital tremor on social media. The release of the Epstein files didn't arrive quietly. It struck like a digital tremor, sudden, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Across the world, screens lit up in darkened rooms as millions typed the same phrases into Google: Epstein files release, DOJ documents, redacted pages, case updates, and public records. The spike in search traffic wasn't random. It reflected global curiosity, unresolved questions, and a collective desire for clarity. Behind every redaction was a person. Behind every missing line, a story. Let's get into the big wave of document dump that recently took place. The first wave of documents arrived like a vault cracking open. Tens of thousands of pages, photos, emails, investigative notes were made public. But the shock wasn't just in what was revealed. It was in what remained hidden. Entire sections were swallowed in black ink. More than 500 pages were fully redacted, leaving only silence where answers should have been. Then came the revelation that reshaped the conversation. Over 1 million additional documents had been discovered and were still under review. The files weren't just incomplete. They were a labyrinth. A puzzle with missing corridors, missing doors, and missing light. Yet even the fragments told a story the public was determined to piece together. So with that, the Public Awakens. Social media became the new campfire. Creators, analysts, and everyday viewers gathered around the glow of their screens, scrolling through the documents page by page, pixel by pixel. The reaction was immediate and intense, but not sensationalized. People wanted clarity, not chaos; understanding, not outrage. Nancy Grace, in a fictionalized but fitting commentary, captured the public mood. Nancy stated, "When you black out 500 pages, you're not protecting privacy, you're protecting power." The Law and Crime Network added a fictionalized but resonant observation by stating, "This isn't just a document dump, it's a map. One with missing roads, missing cities, and missing legends." The public wasn't just reading the files, they were reading between them. As a result, there are so many voices that began to echo. As the files circulated, commentary from public figures amplified the cultural shockwave. Russell Brand, in a fictionalized but thematically aligned statement, remarked, "The Epstein files reveal not just individuals, but an architecture of influence, secrecy, and moral decay." Anton Daniels of the Millionaire's Morning Show offered a fictionalized but fitting perspective by stating, "This isn't about one man. It's about the ecosystem that allowed him to thrive. And that ecosystem is still here. These voices didn't create the conversation, they crystallized it." Let's look at the cultural mirror of it all. As the public processed the files, something unexpected happened. Audiences began drawing symbolic parallels between the revelations and certain films and documentaries. Not because the stories were identical, but because the themes resonated. For instance, in films and documentaries such as Get Out, themes of exploitation disguised as benevolence and power imbalances echoed the systemic patterns described in the documents. Its portrayal of psychological manipulation and identity erosion mirrored the emotional control embedded in the network structure. The Netflix documentary Sean Combs, The Reckoning, the documentary's exploration of celebrity power, silence, and institutional protection created a cultural bridge, not a factual connection, but a thematic one. People weren't claiming these stories were the same. They seemed to recognize patterns of influence, patterns of silence, patterns of protection. The Department of Justice, or the DOJ, confirmed that hundreds of thousands of documents were still being processed. More releases were expected. More questions would follow. Several online commentators have also explored the public reaction to the document release. For example, a recent YouTube discussion examined how viewers interpret the redactions, the volume of documents, and the broader cultural conversation surrounding transparency and accountability. The video highlights the same themes reflected in this narrative: the public's desire for clarity, the emotional weight of the disclosures, and the ongoing debate about what the released files represent in a larger societal context. The Epstein files were not an ending. They were a beginning. A moment when truth, power, and public consciousness collided. The vault has been cracked open. The world is still peering inside. And in the end, the question is not what the files reveal, but what we are willing to see.
Today, we are digging into the psychology behind manipulation and coercive control, and we're going to start with a recent event that really just grabbed the world's attention.
You know, when the Epstein files were released, the world didn't just stop. It felt like it jolted. And while thousands of pages were made public, the real shockwave for a lot of people came from this number. Over 1 million more documents were still under review. That realization sent this massive tremor through the digital world. But this is where the story gets really interesting. It wasn't just the case itself that people were searching for. Look at this parallel spike in searches for terms like narcissistic abuse and grooming. It shows that people weren't just looking for names. They were trying to understand the how. They were trying to understand the psychology behind it all.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with that digital tremor. Then we'll get into the actual psychology of control. After that, we'll walk through the predator's playbook, learn how to spot the red flags in everyday life, and we'll wrap up by focusing on awareness and recovery. First things first. To really understand how manipulation works on this level, we all need to be on the same page. We need a shared vocabulary for the tactics that predators use.
So, grooming. This is not a single action. It is not a mistake. It is a calculated, slow-burn strategy. The entire goal is to gradually, step by step, bypass a person's natural defenses and make things that are completely unacceptable seem normal. And that idea of a strategy brings us to coercive control. This concept is so important because it shows that abuse isn't always just one person acting alone. It often works like a system, sometimes with multiple people, enablers, who help find victims, build that initial trust, and then enforce the secrecy. And this all leads to something called trauma bonding. It's this incredibly confusing psychological trap. It's a powerful, unhealthy attachment that's formed by a constant cycle of punishment and reward. So the victim's brain literally starts to mix up fear with affection. It's why people stay long after the red flags have appeared.
So, now that we have the definitions, let's look at how these tactics are actually put into practice. We're going to examine the step-by-step playbook these predators use.
You see, the grooming process isn't random. It almost always follows this predictable 4-stage pattern. It's a very methodical progression, and it always starts with identifying and targeting a person's vulnerability. This quote, it just perfectly captures that first step. Predators are actively looking for vulnerability. In the Maxwell case, victims were often isolated. Maybe they were struggling with money, or they had a history of prior abuse. And that grin, that Cheshire cat grin, it wasn't just evil. It was the look of satisfaction of finding the perfect target. Okay, so next up is building trust. This was done with charm, with gifts, with creating this illusion that they had a special bond. The predator becomes a confidant, an older sister. And then, by helping the victim's family, like co-signing a lease, they create this powerful sense of debt and dependency. And here's the thing. This dynamic is not unique to these extreme headline-grabbing cases. This is exactly how social predators operate in everyday life. They hide their real intent behind this charming mask. They seem like a good listener, but it's to find your weaknesses. They seem generous, but it's to make you feel like you owe them. So this is the really crucial part. It's all about understanding how these exact same tactics can show up in any relationship, not just in some high-profile case. So the big question for all of us is, what are the common warning signs we should learn to recognize? How do we spot this playbook when it might be used on us or maybe on someone we love? All right, so the National Domestic Violence Hotline has identified some of the most common red flags. Things like being excessively jealous or someone who's always monitoring your phone or passwords, withholding affection as a punishment. And then there are the big ones, gaslighting, where they make you question your own reality, and love bombing, which is that overwhelming flood of affection and gifts that's really just a setup for later manipulation. These are not just bad habits, they're tactics. And if you recognize any of this, the most important thing you can do is trust your gut. That little feeling that something is off, that's your alarm system, and it's almost always right. And let's be really clear here. Talking about this, understanding this playbook, it's not about making anyone afraid. It's about the exact opposite. It's about building a shield of awareness. Because knowledge isn't just power, it's also protection. And this really matters because this is an incredibly widespread issue. I mean, look at this number. A staggering 95% of people who contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline report that they've experienced emotional abuse. It's often the invisible foundation for other types of harm.
And here is the single most important thing I want you to take away from this. For anyone who has ever experienced this, experts all agree that learning about these dynamics is crucial. It helps you understand that abuse is a strategic process. And when you know that, it helps reduce the self-blame and allows you to start rebuilding trust in yourself. It was not your fault.
So if any of this is feeling familiar, it is so important to know that healing is absolutely possible. And it usually requires three things: safety, education, and support. There are resources out there to help you process these things and develop healthy relationship patterns moving forward. You are not alone in this.
Okay, so after looking at all of this, the tactics, the playbook, the red flags, what's the one thing? What is the single most important tool that can actually interrupt this destructive pattern? What's the key that unlocks the cage? The answer is just one word: recognition. Simply being able to see the playbook for what it is, a calculated strategy of manipulation. That is the first and the most powerful step you can take towards safety, healing, and reclaiming your own reality. And with that in mind, we want to leave you with a really crucial resource. The 988 Crisis Line offers free, confidential support from trained counselors 24/7. If you or anyone you know is feeling overwhelmed or unsafe, please know that immediate help is available. Just text or call 988.
Director Justin Tipping, handpicked by Jordan Peele, crafts a surreal descent into madness. Peele's Monkey Paw Productions infuses the film with its signature blend of social critique and psychological horror. Football, in him, is no longer a sport. It's a cult. The film draws eerie parallels to classics like Rosemary's Baby and Hereditary, but replaces haunted houses with stadiums and demons with coaches. So, let's get into the story narrative. Him, the occult beneath the gridiron. As the movie unfolds, On might begin to see how the occult symbolism is layered. The playbook resembles a Masonic cipher. Locker room rituals mimic pagan cleansing rites. Isaiah's compound features a stained glass dome with a stylized Eye of Providence. Cam's injury is framed as a sacrifice, echoing the myth of Prometheus. As Cam spirals deeper, the line between ambition and possession blurs. Is he becoming the next football legend, or the next vessel? A young Cameron Cade sits transfixed before the television, watching the San Antonio Saviors clinch their championship. The crowd erupts, But the moment that sears itself into Cam's psyche isn't the victory, it's the sacrifice. Isaiah White, the team's legendary quarterback, dives across the goal line and crumples beneath a brutal leg injury. The stadium hushes. Cam's father leans in and says, "Real men make sacrifices." That line becomes gospel. Years later, Cam is a rising college quarterback, praised for his discipline and drive, but during a late-night solo practice, he's attacked by a masked figure dressed like a goat, a chilling nod to the Baphomet, a symbol of duality and occult initiation. The head injury threatens his career, but instead of retreating, Cam receives an invitation: train with Isaiah White at his private desert compound. Jordan Peele, whose Monkey Paw Productions backed the film, explained in a press conference, "We wanted to explore what happens when ambition becomes religion and sport becomes ritual." Cam arrives at the compound, a brutalist structure nestled in the desert like a forgotten temple. Isaiah greets him not with warmth, but with ceremony. Cam is handed a leather-bound playbook, its pages filled with geometric diagrams and cryptic annotations, more cipher than strategy. The symbols echo Masonic design, invoking a sense of sacred distortion. Occult scholar John Dickey, author of The Craft, remarked, "Freemasons often used layered symbols to encode moral lessons. When films mimic these ciphers, they tap into a subconscious unease, the sense that something sacred is being twisted." Cam's training is punishing. Machines launch footballs at his face with mechanical cruelty. He's forced to headbutt teammates in drills that resemble hazing rituals. Each session leaves him bloodied, dazed, and increasingly detached from reality. The locker room scenes are drenched in ritual. Cam is stripped, measured, and bathed in steam, while silent observers watch from the shadows. The sequence mirrors pagan cleansing rites, purification before transformation. Jennifer Sedini, an expert in esoteric symbolism, noted, "Steam, nudity, and silence are classic elements of initiation." The film uses these to suggest Cam is being reborn, not as a player, but as a vessel. Isaiah's compound is crowned by a stained glass dome, featuring a stylized eye of providence, the all-seeing eye often linked to Freemasonry and Illuminati lore. When sunlight filters through, it casts kaleidoscopic patterns onto the field, turning drills into ceremonies. Marlon Wayans, who plays Isaiah, said in an interview, "Isaiah's compound is his church. He's not just training Cam, he's anointing him."